5:34, we'll call the meeting to order. Clint, if you would give us invocation.
Let's pray. Lord, we come to you, thank you for this opportunity to come together to improve our community, bless our citizens, and city leadership, and give this community guidance and understanding in all matters discussed. In your name, amen.
Amen. Shane, if you wouldn't mind leading us in flag
Please
salute,
stand
please.
for the flag salute, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If you would call the roll, please.
Drew,
Here.
Shane,
Here.
Whitney,
Here.
Clint,
Here.
Dr. Newsom.
On consent items, 1A, we have consideration of approval March 5th meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call for a vote, please.
Drew,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
Whitney,
Yes.
Clint,
Yes.
Dr. Newsom.
Yes. On 3A, introduce possible confirmation of Susan Henderson as Craft and Toll assigned code writer for land use ordinance overhaul. Reed, do you want to make that introduction for us?
Yeah, and then Christopher, you're getting onto that call? Okay, awesome. Susan Henderson has been the proposed reassignee for Craft and Toll to do the land use ordinance overhaul. And this meeting would just be to have a discussion with her, an introduction, confirmation if this is how we want to proceed as a city, and then an opportunity for y'all to ask any questions or have any thoughts immediately. So I think Christopher's going to pull her up and we can start the conversation. How are you doing, Susan?
Very well, thank you.
Good. Sorry we can't see. We can see you, but you can't see us. We're we're in our chamber. We had some technological things, so we're in our chamber. But we're all here. We're just excited to get to know you a little bit and start the conversation. So, Susan, would love to hear an introduction from you, and then get going.
Sure. So Susan Henderson with Placemakers and Craft and Toll have asked us to assist with your ongoing zoning work because that is, in fact, one of our specialties. And we've done a lot of work in Northwest Arkansas, and we got acquainted with Craft and Toll in that region. And so looking at the analysis they've done and some of their suggestions, it seems like a good fit for us, and hopefully you'll feel the same. Our firm has been around since 2003, and we're a small firm that we work a lot with consultants and also a lot for other professional firms. So we have really collaborative relationships with other professionals, and it seems like it's been a really good fit for us. Our client base are almost exclusively small to medium-sized towns and cities, and we have specialized, if that's the appropriate term, in sort of that middle scale of municipalities, although we have worked a fair amount in counties as well.
Awesome. Susan, can you discuss or share maybe a couple of cities that you've, like, favorite projects that you've worked on, and some details of what that process looked like for us?
Oh, well, sure. That's, how do you pick favorites? There's so many. Currently, we're working in Bentonville and Rogers, Arkansas, and I think that the current client is always the one that has your closest attention. In both of those situations, there was zoning. In Bentonville, we're also doing their comprehensive plan update. And they're both smaller cities also, and maybe a little larger than Durant, but in a similar ballpark. And they're quite different from each other, which is really interesting to be neighbors, but you know, they have different ways of perceiving the world, they have different priorities, different politics. And so it's really been very interesting this last year and a half, to work in collaborating communities that actually have very different needs and interests, and to try to be responsive to both of them. We're also, another long-term client we've had that we've really enjoyed working with is the Birmingham, Alabama Regional Planning Commission. And so we've done a variety of work with them in the cities within their 5-county region for their local municipalities. They have us do work when they don't have staff capacity to manage it. And so we've done a fair amount of zoning in that region as well, along with comprehensive planning. We really do like long-term clients. We believe in developing relationships that both we and the cities appreciate each other, and so we do have many clients that we've actually had for many years, and the Birmingham Regional Planning Commission is one of those.
Awesome. One other question, and I'd love to have y'all ask any questions as well. But why, you've mentioned a couple times the zoning code rewrite. Y'all, it's, at least in my opinion, have a unique value add when it comes to redoing zoning and working on that. Could you explain that process a little bit and why your type of zoning code is just unique?
Yeah, and we're flexible. This isn't the only thing we do, but we do prefer what is known as a form-based code. It's the way we used to build our cities historically, and it's that the shape of the building and the way it fit into the city, like downtown Durant and your historic neighborhoods, how that all went together spatially was actually more important than the specific uses in the building. And that method of development happened prior to the Industrial Revolution. And then of course, once industry began moving into cities, that's when zoning began, with the realization that this isn't healthy next to residential uses and we need to separate them. And so that then, evolved into the 50s through basically the 90s, 1950s through 1990s, into this extreme separation of uses, where many local governments will have commercial corridors that don't permit housing. And like in most of the US right now, we have this huge housing shortage. And so to have miles of commercial corridors when Amazon has, destroyed so much local retail, but not be able to infill that with residential, that's an economic development problem. So with form-based coding, depending on where you are in the city, you look at all of the compatible uses that can live happily together. And then you permit them all in a district, all the ones that work well together. Of course, there'll always be some single family that is just that, but hopefully in your downtown you have some residential to go along with your commercial, because it helps your commerce to be more successful when you have shoppers that live there. And so that methodology of prioritizing form over use, you still regulate use, but the shape of your city takes priority over that. And that's something that it's become a current best practice. Probably it began about 35 years ago, that methodology, and it's really gained momentum, and it's being used at all scales of villages, towns, cities, and entire counties. And that's our preference. If that doesn't work for you, we can do a conventional code as well. But we feel like as we began to get acquainted, as I can actually see your faces and see if you're smiling or frowning when I say things, then we'll be able to work together to determine really what the best form is for Durant.
And do y'all have any thoughts or questions immediately, and please introduce yourselves as you speak.
Susan, this is Drew Jackson. Had a question for you. So hypothetically, if we do elect to go to form-based, I just kind of like your thoughts and opinions. Obviously, that's going to be something new for us and foreign to most who are working with the city. How does that typically transition, or how do we manage the implementation of things like that?
Yeah, we try our best to keep it as simple as possible. Normally, it is a fairly easy transition. We write it in the same, basically in the same articles or chapters, so that your development community, your applicants, your homeowner that wants to do an addition, all of those people can find things in similar places that they find them now. It's normally a fairly easy transition. It's probably the people that it will take the longest to make the transition actually are y'all, the planning commission, and staff. It's the folks that have to work with it every day, that you'll have to find your way around the new code, and we'll work very closely with you. One thing that we normally do with our clients is we stay on call for your first few applications, just to assist in helping walk you through how to apply the code as a learning process, because it's like switching. Sorry, I'm a Mac user, and so pardon me, all y'all that use PCs, but it's like switching from a PC to a Mac. There's a learning curve. It's a different operating system, but once you do it, you're really happy you did. So it takes a minute.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Obviously, a lot of smaller communities, we haven't had a lot of code changes in a long time, so we've been doing it this way for a long time, and certainly the transition is going to be an important part of what we're doing, so I appreciate your comments.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, we find that the most successful thing is to stay, we're available for a whole lot of follow-up. And another thing we like to be clear about is your code should be a living document. Now, you don't want to be, obviously we want to get it to where it solves a lot of your problems right out of the gate, but there'll be things that you find, what, this just didn't work for us, and we may need to make text amendments for a bit. Another thing we'll try to do with you and with Reed is work on what are your most common variances, because if there are things that people are constantly asking for that the city actually supports, then we may as well go ahead and permit it, so that doesn't keep coming up.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, my Director of Economic Development has a question. Her name's Kathy. She's going to come up here.
Hi, Susan. I'm real interested in the work that you've done in Birmingham. I'm familiar with the Homewood area and Mountain Brook, and also real familiar with Samford University. And so I've seen those two neighborhoods profoundly change over the past 25 years. So I wonder at what point your organization entered the conversation in Birmingham, and were you a part of that, the zoning change in those neighborhoods? And then certainly I have witnessed firsthand many times over the revitalization there between the neighborhoods and the community. What is it? There's a Hilton in Homewood, the Valley Inn, and all that area in there is just so different than it was. And I'd love to know how you saw the community adjust as you brought in different code that then changed the way people lived. So if you could talk to that narrative.
Sure, that's a really good point, and it's something that y'all have to consider closely. We were Homewood had a mixed-use district permitted in their downtown, and we did their sign code. We were involved in making recommendations for a downtown code, but it didn't move forward because there were too many community members that were worried about the Valley Hotel, the heights that were permitted with that application under their mixed-use district. You know, it's a 1- and 2-story Main Street, and so local residents just felt like the 5 stories was too much. Of course, the Soho development had happened probably 10 years ago, also under that mixed-use district. And there's just so many people there that said, you know what, this is a small town. We don't want to be Birmingham. That at the end of the day, the big problem is this. They had given the right, like the Regions Bank on the corner of the highway there, they'd given away the height already. So in downtown, you could do, with their floor area ratio permissions, you could do 10 to 12 stories. And so they'd already given away the farm, but when they considered the possibility of adding residential into that mix, they were afraid that the development community would just flock in and build 5-story buildings. And so at the end of the day, they chose not to update their zoning. So ultimately, the only influence we've had in Homewood was through their sign code. We weren't involved at all in Mountain Brook. A lot of the communities we've been working in are more fragile communities. Like right now we're working in Bessemer. We have worked in Pelham, Calera, Moody. So Calera and Moody are a little more suburban, and then Fairfield.
I'm just interested in when there was a community pushback to that, that zoning change. What kind of role did you take with planning and zoning to help support what really ended up happening there?
We had many meetings with planning and zoning. We did lots of edits. They were very involved. It was an interesting situation. In a lot of those small Alabama towns, they don't have a planning director. They have basically a building code. The building code guy is their zoning administrator. And because they didn't have a planning director, the 2 downtown city councilors were essentially the project managers for that. So we were working more with council than we were with planning commission. But then when it got into the edits of the code, that was a very close process with planning commission.
Susan, it's Shane Knight here. And excuse me for my ignorance on this, but at the point where you're picking up this project from Craft and Toll, I don't know where they really left it, or if that is even in the picture and you're starting from scratch. And if so, depending on starting from scratch or picking this up midway through, what is that transition like for us to potentially head towards a form-based code versus just updating our current ordinances?
Well, right now, what I received from Karen McCurdy at Craft and Toll, the woman, and I apologize, I've never met her, that was the project manager for y'all. She left a large range of documents, but they were largely analytical. There wasn't actual recommendations developed that I have seen. And so as a result, my direction from Craft and Toll is that we work with y'all to get you what you need. And you know, so they were planning to move into a form-based code even before they lost their employee. But so I don't know that systemically has, that has changed as far as the framework goes. But I would say, you know, like I said before, I think it's the best practice. There's a lot of data behind it for economic development, for historic preservation. But at the end of the day, if it's not what y'all are looking for, then we can go with something very similar to what you have now.
I'm a fan. I'm not negating that by any means. I'm a fan. I'm only one voice up here, but I am a fan of form-based. And in doing a little bit of research, and I don't know if you guys were a part of this or not, but even looking at the current planning and zoning website for a city like Hartford, Connecticut, or something like that, that's under a form-based code, it's brilliantly easy to navigate and understand. Do you find that to be the case in the projects that you've worked on as well?
Yes, and thank you for being willing to say that. It's hard for me to to hear you as a planning commissioner say it is different than if I said it. It just sounds like a sales pitch. But yes, the thing about form-based codes is typically the way we design them is on a 2-page spread. You should be able to see everything you need to know about doing something under a specific zoning district. Of course, this doesn't apply to if you're doing a large-scale development or a PUD or something of that nature. But there are illustrations that show, you know, what setbacks are and how you measure building heights and where parking goes, and the illustrations make it very intuitive to understand. The goal is that the average homeowner can pick it up and look at it and know what they can do on their lot. And even more so for the development community, of course, that are used to using codes. And then additionally, like I mentioned earlier about compatible uses, another thing we try to do is collapse use categories so that you don't have, you know, we've worked in some places that are like a beauty salon. And in this district, you can have one with 2 chairs, and in this district, one with 4 chairs, and 8 chairs, and 12 chairs. And, you know, it's like, why do we have to have that much control over beauty salon? And so if we can, we'll try to collapse it to personal service. That includes beauty salon, barbershop, day spa. You know, and then of course we definitely exclude and are clear about things like adult retail and services and entertainment that you're trying to manage closely. But there's so many ways in which you make it simpler, makes your lives as planning commissioners easier. For example, and case in point, years ago we were working in Decatur, Georgia, and I don't know if y'all know Decatur, but it's a very, it's a beer town, or it has become one, and they have brew pubs, you know, on basically every corner. Well, when that use first came into existence, they didn't know how to place it because they didn't have a zoning category that permitted the actual production of the beer in the restaurant. So if you have food and beverage, that covers all sorts of creative use, you know, and then you don't have to go sticking your brew pubs in industrial, which is what had to happen for 5 or 6 years till they figured the zoning out. So this is a very long-winded way of saying I agree with you completely. Form-based codes are intuitive. They're graphically compelling. They use plain language instead of legalese. And they try to simplify as much as possible while still protecting the municipality.
Thank you. I have one more question.
Sure.
You mentioned early that you love it when you have long-term relationships with your municipalities. We're in no position on this commission to do those sorts of discussions or negotiations, but what does a long-term relationship with placemakers look like typically?
Well, there's 2 or 3 different ways that it's happened, that we've been, you know, very fortunate. And we have some clients that will hire us for a project, and then, you know, a few years later, they'll hire us for another project, and then another project. We just got done doing the 10-year update to a comp plan we wrote 10 years ago. And we did the zoning in between, and we did an on-call planning service in between. One thing that we frequently do with clients is this on-call service where a municipality is not a guaranteed revenue stream. It's just, you know, it's a 3-year contract that gets updated as needed. It's especially useful in smaller communities that have smaller planning staffs, and as they need, you know, additional help for special projects, then they know somebody who's been through an RFQ process and has been pre-approved to help them with that work.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, my name is Clint Horner. I know you might have spoke to this already, but what are some issues that we may come up with, maybe in residential, maybe downtown districts, commercial districts that with form-based that might be different than what we're doing now that may cause some issues or difficulties with other clients?
Well, the first thing, and pardon me, it's been a minute since I looked at your code, and I can't remember what your parking requirements are downtown. Some cities have already, in historic areas, they don't have parking minimums. And that's really appropriate because you were built out a long time ago, and if for a change of use, you make the applicant go back through a parking review and add parking, then that makes it very difficult from an economic development perspective to keep businesses open downtown. And so parking is always a tricky topic. We always advocate for, and this depends on the local appetite, you know, we're not married to this, but we always advocate for letting the free market determine how much parking is needed. Most of your builders and developers won't do something that they can't lease or they can't sell. And on top of that, if they're getting a loan for it, the bank is already going to require a certain amount of parking. But so the best practice currently is to advise our clients to get out of the parking business. But that's something that will make residents nervous. And so if it does, then we step back from that and you know, move forward with some some calibrated parking minimums that are appropriate for Durant. So parking is always a tricky issue. Another tricky issue is in residential areas. That your home is your single largest investment for most families. And the thing that residents need to know is that their home values aren't being threatened. And so one thing we try to do is just make sure that the regulations that are crafted, especially for your single family areas, that they don't move around too much, because the last thing you want to do is to make everyone worried and uncomfortable about their primary investment. In general commercial, usually that's not much of a problem. If on your commercial corridors you're looking to give more permissions, which many of our clients are today, and that's something we'll have to work through together, is really what your goals are. But many clients are looking to enable more residential to occur on commercial corridors, or actually encourage buildings to begin to create main streets instead of just big parking lots. And if you're just getting permission to do more on a lot, that won't make people nervous. But if you require it outside of your downtown, most of your strip centers and areas like that, they get really uncomfortable with those sorts of requirements too. So we try to balance, what's ideal and the city's vision with what's practical for your existing businesses.
Susan, this is Drew again. I came up with another question, if you don't mind. Again, just thinking about the implementation and the work that goes in, to develop the language and implementation and all those things. What type of interaction, with this committee would you expect or recommend in terms of, type and frequency, and what have you found works best?
That's a great question. I guess it depends on what y'all can tolerate. The cities that we have found have the easiest transition, especially with Planning Commission, to a new code, are those who are very involved. And so, we're happy to present an update of the process at every commission meeting you can tolerate. We will provide you early drafts. Usually our process is we give you, we work with Reed and y'all to determine exactly what the goals are for how much needs to change, what should be left alone, and the goals of the change. And then we provide an annotated outline of the suggestion we're making about the update. And then we get you guys to critique that, and then we make the edits to the critique. And then the first draft, of course, before it goes public, in the best of all possible worlds, we give it to y'all in small groups. Ideally we'd have a steering committee that would be largely comprised of commissioners, technical staff, planning, engineering, public works, parks and open space. And that group would be critiquing the first draft before it went public. Of course, once it's on your agenda, then it is public. But we'd like y'all to be as involved as you care to be. A lot of places we work, we know that the Planning Commission are volunteers, and so we don't want to ask too much of your time either. And so we'll just have to negotiate that and see what y'all want to do.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I would expect that between staff and commissioners and councilmen as well, we should be able to garner some involvement. So this is something that's important to us, and we certainly are going to need and appreciate the help. So thank you.
right?
Any other thoughts or questions or comments? Awesome. Susan, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. I know I'm excited. We're excited to keep thinking through things and get going on a process possibly. So, yeah, thanks for your time. I'm sure we'll follow up soon on other comments or questions and whatnot. So, just some background. I know I probably should have introduced her this way, but I know Susan mutually. There's a gentleman I met named Nathan Norris, he was the founder of Placemakers originally, and he left Placemakers to go to Lafayette, Louisiana, where their form-based code won the Dree House Award, very nationally acclaimed award for code and planning and zoning, and then he's left and used the similar skills and techniques to create new developments around the country with these similar principles, and they're some of the highest value experiential communities in the country. So it's a really, really cool concept. So thank you so much, Susan.
Yes,
Susan,
it was a
thank you,
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Talk soon. Okay.
Open it up for discussion, comments.
Reed, when are they, assuming council approves of this, when are they planning to get started? Is there a kickoff date established, or?
No, it would be as soon as possible. And the process, the proposed process, and I think it's on the contract, and there is between 8 and 12 months, depending on how we are involved. Two big goals of mine in this process is that all of her information is public with y'all and me, and that we're working very closely. Even if that's me emailing y'all a lot, we're going to need to really do this as a team. So.
She made mention of this, but I think it's an important point is making sure that on this, on our team working toward this goal, we have, commissioners and, the important members of staff, other members of our community council. I think we'll need some representation. And so, I think that's something we need to put some thought into in the short term and see who is willing to participate.
Yeah. A committee of some sorts. Okay.
Reed, I might have asked you this, but just for the sake of, the hearing. My understanding is that we did not necessarily do a search, but this, Susan came through recommendation. Is that correct?
Yeah, so she, Karen McCurdy, who's kind of been the lead at Craft and Toll, when their assigned contractor left, she had two recommendations for me, and one was not available and the other one was Susan. Just so happened that I'd heard of Susan from other circles, and so.
I will say that I do have a degree of caution of going into agreements like this without having a search. That's how we got into the situation in the first place. It was just a staff recommendation or connection, and anyways, I think just for the record, I think it's a bad practice not to go into these things without a search. I understand that this is a priority, and we certainly need to make some progress. We've already spent money, etc., and so moving forward, the best we can is going to have to be the deal. But just as a point, in the future, we need to make sure that we have some searches. My opinion. Does anyone have any thoughts or recommendations in terms of how we move forward?
Is this an action item? It's just an information item on the agenda. Was it just a discussion and kind of a meeting, or is there something that we need to yay or nay for council?
Yeah, I wasn't exactly sure how y'all wanted to approach this process. That's why I said introduce and possible confirmation. After the meeting, I figured y'all would have some takeaways on, do we want to do the search process or do we want to, so. If we want, we can have a possible confirmation.
That can go under new business if they want to confirm it.
Okay.
I'm gonna be honest, that feels a little inappropriate to me. I mean, I don't have any issue with giving city council our thoughts and our input on this process, but I mean, I think that's something that city council is gonna be the ultimate vote anyway. I think that's something they need to vote on, not necessarily us, but that's just my 2 cents.
Can somebody explain how we got from Crafton Toll to here? Because my understanding is we were using Crafton Toll, we were going down the road with Crafton Toll. We had, and I guess the Crafton Toll came on board prior to my being part of the commission, and they went through the process and we awarded them the bid to do all this, and then that went south, and then Crafton Toll has then helped us find this new group that would pick up where they left off, because I guess there's some, I don't know, they feel there's some responsibility there to finish what they actually promised the city through this contract with them. So is that a misunderstanding, or is that, because that, I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, are we at a stage now where we're gonna go, we're gonna look at potentially going in a completely different direction, or are we just trying to get Crafton Toll to fulfill their obligation, and this is their remedy for that, is to go with this group that we just heard from? Is that, am I misunderstanding where we're at?
Do you want me to take it, or do you want to take it?
You start, I'll add in.
Okay. So, I guess to keep it short and blunt, my understanding is that Crafton Toll had turnover. With that turnover, they also lost the work that had been performed to that point. So they have taken what we have paid for so far, and are going to apply that toward having a code writer work for us to replace the work that had been performed and to complete it as well. So that's the short answer. You want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no,
So
that's
this
spot on.
this group that we just heard from is not necessarily who Crafton Toll has told us to continue to use. It's just a potential. Crafton Toll's gonna help us with whatever transition we decide. Okay.
Yeah, they're doing this to remedy.
So will the city still contract through Crafton Toll, and Crafton Toll is hiring placemakers? Is that, or
Yeah,
is this a
so-
whole new?
Yeah, so in their contract that I have, they have the right to assign a third party, reassign or assign a third party contractor, and this was their proposed reassign. Obviously, if we didn't confirm, I could call her again and say, hey, still owe us this work. Planning Commission or City Council didn't really want to move forward with this. So this is their attempt at basically, remedying the situation.
I guess that's where I'm not having a problem with us not seeing other proposals. If this is who, I mean, if we're still okay with going through Crafton Toll, then, and this is who Crafton Toll is recommending, then I don't know what my faith level is in that because of the past experience, but that would make me feel okay with us not having to go out and do a proposal bid process again, if that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, this is essentially Crafton Toll completing their contract.
Yeah, what they owe us.
Yeah.
Yep.
Gotcha. I probably feel similarly, kind of learning that about not going out for another RFP or a search, that, they're holding up their end of the bargain and picking this up and finishing it.
Any other comments? Reed, do you know if you or council, were you looking for some sort of recommendation?
Yeah, so, let me maybe tell you all a little bit about it on my side. I'd heard, hey, this work had gone on, and I went to try to track it down. Eventually, I got in touch with Crafton Toll, Karen McCurdy, been very helpful. And she said, hey, I don't know where we left off. It was all kind of a really sudden turnover, and I'm going to track down this work for you, and we can have this conversation when the work comes. And at first she couldn't find the work, and she said, hey, I'm so sorry, Reed, this is not how we want to run our business. If we can't find it, we will pay for a replacement and assign this code writer. And so anyway, that process happened a couple months later. I think it was in December. She said, hey, we found it, and she sent it to me, and it was deemed by me and also the two possible assigned code writers as not satisfactory with the information, at least that she had. And then she said, hey, on our dollar, we'll bring in to redo the work. So.
Okay, we'll move on to 4A, under administration. Consider the approval and updated sign ordinance. Reed, do you have a presentation on that?
Yes, I have the documents. Do y'all have the attached sign ordinance? Awesome. So yeah, I know we talked about this last month. We've kind of been going back and forth, but generally the intent of this, it's a partial replacement, and then the charts at the end are continued with all the different measurements and illustrations. But yeah, generally I went to my code enforcement guys and said, hey, what are some of the codes that we have a lot of trouble enforcing, and then that is a lot of very confusing for the public? And this was their first answer. They said they were spending so much time trying to justify what's a permanent sign, what's a temporary sign, and then generally like the confusion and the lack of clarity on reading the sign code. And so we worked together to find a replacement with some of our original, like I said, charts, so there would be a smooth transition. And this is kind of what we came up with. Generally, I think I have it highlighted, but the area that says the temporary and permanent definitions. Temporary sign means a sign intended to be used and in fact used for a time period of 1 year or less. And then permanent sign is, permanent signs means a sign intended to be erected and used, or in fact which is used for a time period in excess of 1 year. So that definite time period helps enforcement, but also gives clarity on that temporary sign. And then generally what we did is we tried to make sure that everything in the previous code was covered but clearer in these definitions. We've received some good commentary on a little adjustments or tweaks for the times or for our city. So generally, and then one other thing to note is the temporary and permanent sign definitions are further elaborated on in their own sections. Again, that give even more clarity. So I can read some if you want. Permanent sign requirements. All permanent signs shall require a permit. Permanent signs should be classified as one of the three following types: wall signs, window signs, and ground signs. Previously it had been a permanent sign is just something that's intended to be permanent. And then temporary was a temporary sign intended to be permanent, and they were all the same materials. Everything was the same other than intention, so we couldn't enforce that. Or, as the public, they were confused on what's a permanent sign, what's a temporary sign, and how do we put it up, and how do we get a permit for it. So, yeah, generally then there's some clarity on temporary signs. And then the big thing was illumination, and how do we deal with that. Let's see, and then like I said, these charts in the back are the same as previous. Do we have any immediate thoughts? Or
I have a couple of comments while
Yeah.
you're talking about the temporary and permanent thing. can you give me an example of a temporary sign?
Yeah, so like a pennant or flag. Let me go to the temporary sign section and just read it. It lists examples.
So I'm just trying to think of what you're currently up against with temporary signs, only because, in my opinion, a year seems like a really long time for a temporary sign.
Yeah,
So
that's
I was
true.
curious where kind of the year mark.
Some of
comes
the
from.
discussion and complaints that I've heard, from citizens is, they've got these, flags, new openings or whatever. And I believe we have a short period of time, maybe it's a couple weeks, at the moment. And so they're being forced to take down their sign in a couple weeks, and have had some complaint about that, although I don't necessarily, I'm with you, a year is too long for, a vacancy sign or a temporary flag that we've got, flying, but.
Yeah, I think
maybe,
that's
maybe not.
actually a really good example, but. I just was curious about the
Yeah.
year-long deal. I mean,
Oh.
I think if there's some reason for it to be a year, then I don't have a problem.
Yeah.
It just seems like a really long time.
Yeah, let me look. I'm looking for the temporary sign section. Where is it? Oh, here we go. Okay. In the temporary, it's 158.07. All signs not previously exempted and are not permanent signs as provided shall require a temporary sign permit. All temporary signs shall be issued permits subject to the restrictions set forth in the schedule of sign regulations. So there's further restrictions. And then here we go. So banners, temporary wall signs, flag signs, and pennants less than 16 square feet are permitted, provided they are attached at each corner, print, and or end so as not to prevent movement. Banners may be attached to ground signs within the frame, provided that they are attached at each corner point and so or end so as to prevent movement. Streamers are prohibited. Only one banner is permitted per establishment. No business shall display such signs for more than 30 days per calendar year for more than 30 continuous days. The date each sign is first displayed and the time period for which the sign will be displayed shall be legibly marked on the sign. The area of each banner shall not count toward the minimum sign area as specified in the schedule of sign regulations. And then,
can you tell me where you are real quick?
yeah, it's 158.07. So it's right under that graph that says clear sight triangle.
Yeah. So the regulation in this particular section says that you can't display the sign for more than 90 days a calendar year or for 30 consecutive days.
Yeah. And so I
how
think
would that play into the year-long restriction?
So I think the intention might be that 1 year, you have this year limit to display for 90 days, or 30 days, just not consecutively.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be, say you're open on the weekends and your grand opening was, but you want to keep kind of indicating that and bringing citizens by. I think that would be maybe the intention, or special events, or why do we have to go for a temporary permit every time we may try to do that, or have this weekend event, or so I think that might be the intention.
And do they pull a permit for these temporary signs?
Yes.
They do. Okay.
Yes. And then there are signs which do not require a permit, and they're usually related to like addressing and that kind of stuff. So.
I'm just throwing this out as a discussion that I'm curious if like a 6-month limit on a temporary sign might be more appropriate, and then maybe you're only allowed 2 consecutive 6-month permits for that particular sign or business or whatever that may be.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I would think consecutive. Well, yeah, just as a thought. I agree with the new business ideas and you know, some of these businesses that have vacancies and you know, those vacancies come and go. I don't necessarily think you should have to pull a permit every time, you know, you've got an apartment that becomes available or a, you know, lease space that becomes available. Or maybe you do. I don't know. I don't have a problem with a year if it's warranted. Just seems like a really long time.
Yeah. And we can change it as discussed to that 6 month if that's more logical.
So we're talking about like the 6 months in aggregate and still 30-day continuous?
Yeah. Where in the definitions it says intention, it talks about that 1 year mark and then over, under, and then this one is 6 months. And I guess that would mean we'd change the permanent to being over 6 months, or, you know, that would obviously affect that definition a little too.
Do we actually have an Uptown Review Board at the current time?
I'm not sure
I just
where
wondered
that says.
'cause it's referenced in here, and I don't know. I just wasn't familiar with that board.
Yeah.
So.
It's probably, it probably should have been changed to like CBD, and I'm sorry, I meant to change that.
So one other thing that I noticed in here is in 158.09 in section, let's see. Let me figure out what section that actually is. It looks like it's, I'm a little uncertain of how this is numbered, but I'm going to call it paragraph J on page 13 of the 20. So it's talking about if the property owner wants an opinion as to the existence of a violation, that they would come back to Planning and Zoning Commission. And that just seems like a strange fit, since normally signs and things like that would go through like the Board of Adjustment or Code Enforcement. That wouldn't usually come back through the Zoning Commission. So it just, I don't know that it's wrong, it just seemed a little odd.
Yeah, yeah. It would make more sense to go through the code enforcement officer, probably.
When I mean, it's essentially given a right to an appeal. It's just the appeal wouldn't usually come through us. It would be like the Board of Adjustment or your code enforcement judge or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point.
I've got several if we're just going to keep rolling through.
Yeah, I'd love it. It's a good time for.
Are you talking about edits?
Yeah. Do we want to do that here or okay?
Do you want to do that here or via email?
Whichever. I'm open for conversation and getting feedback if it's easier now, but we can always do it over email. We can table it and just.
I can follow up with email, but I'll throw these out to you just real quick.
Okay.
Section 158.04 under administration. I had noted this before in my previous review, but it talks about no sign. 158.04 item B number 3 says no sign except for a municipally owned sign or signs authorized by the city manager for community events, blah blah blah, of nonprofits, education, religious, etc. Is our city manager gonna approve or disapprove signs for those groups?
So the way that I'm reading it is any of those signs, any of these people that are, any of these groups, nonprofit, public, educational, religious, and charitable organizations, they have to be authorized by the city manager to place signs above the public right-of-way, including on utility poles. So any signs that would be located above that right-of-way, that's where you can need city manager approval. And maybe we could change that city manager approval to Board of Adjustment approval or whatever that.
Yeah, I was just thinking it, I mean, it could be City of Durant in my opinion, but I don't know.
Okay.
It seems like that would go through
Yeah.
permitting or code enforcement versus having everything have to be approved by the city manager for a sign around town.
Yeah, similar to what Whitney mentioned.
And along those similar lines, so we've got another section down here that is signs that don't require permit.
Yeah.
And it lists all of those groups again, like nonprofit, religious, educational. And I don't know why those groups would not have to pull a sign permit. Just
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can take a deeper look on.
I'm open for discussion. I was just,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty large group of entities in town that would not be required to pull any sort of permits for signs.
Yeah, I think it might
I'm
be.
not trying to make people pull permits for every single thing. It's one of those things that just seems odd.
Yeah, I think it's open conversation on where we decide to go with this, but I think generally it's kind of in that same line with that zoning use that Drew and I talked about a while ago, with anything related to community purpose or community use can be put at a specific place, irregardless of the zoning. I think it's that kind of, hey, if you're doing this for a nonprofit or public use, then, but that's the intention. But if we don't desire to go that route, I can remove it or change some of the options in here, or make it clear on what exactly they can do with that capability. So,
Well, would there be a time limit on those that don't require a permit? I mean, that might be something to stick in there to assist that maybe.
yeah,
Isn't that what's in I where it's saying they can be displayed for 14 days before the program or event, but then they've got to be down no more than 48 hours after?
Thank you. Yes, that was in there.
And I will
see.
say, the only thing that bothered me about that a little bit is that 48 hours, and this is more just kind of from experience with knowing like Durant School, some of their programs and their suppers and things like that that they do. It's not unusual for them not to go and pick up the signs until like the Monday after, and it might have been a Thursday event.
Mm-hmm.
And we have $100 a day penalty in here, and I'm like, ooh, that's pretty steep if the school waits till Monday to go get those, so.
yeah, that's a good point. So maybe changing that to consecutive days to something else.
Those are the kind of signs I was thinking of when I was trying to make that point. I don't want to, every time someone has a chili dinner for the fire department or whatever it may be, I don't want them to feel like they've got to come have a permit for that, but the 14-day thing may solve that issue.
Yeah. Okay.
I saw the 14-day, I didn't have any problem with it.
I thought the 14 days was pretty reasonable. The pickup time, I was like, I don't know that they're always gonna get out there in 48 hours. I mean, they possibly should, but they don't.
Well, there's some side restrictions on that. I don't think we're talking about really like large signs that say, we got a bunch of them, yeah.
Okay.
I have another one if we beat that one already.
Let's keep going.
Your site triangle graphic
Mhm.
that was replacing the old one. It's hard for me to decipher the differences between like graphic A and graphic C, and then maybe where those triangle distances referenced later.
Okay. So you're saying maybe simplify it, clarify it.
I think the graphics are fairly simple, but we show a larger triangle and a smaller triangle on the same type of graphic, but in reading through there, I didn't see where we referenced what those triangles meant. or what those dimensions actually were.
Yeah. Okay.
It's kind of like the graphics just stuck in there, but there's nothing referencing it.
Yeah. Okay.
While we're on that point, I'll jump in. I know that we sent some comments about making sure that the graphics were legible. The one above it is still pretty blurry.
A little blurry, yeah.
What's that? I mean, if you got a mouse in your pocket, that's fine. I had another one under 158.08. Item B, number 5, construction. We're referencing the city of Westerville in Ohio.
Oops. 158. 08. 5. Yep. Yep, I see it. My bad.
And then we had a section for electronic messaging boards or digital boards in the previous edit, but I didn't, did we take that out completely?
Yeah, I removed it. I think
Okay.
it's kind of a little inundated.
Okay.
So,
Is that something we might just want to pick up later?
yeah,
When
I
we
think,
talk about, and you mentioned it earlier, but when we talk about illumination levels and lumens,
yeah,
and how those get turned down after a certain time at night, and
yeah,
I do think that's going to become pretty important. I mean, more and more digital signs are being installed, so I think some of those restrictions we need to start thinking about putting into place. Yeah, your strobing sequences and that sort of thing for folks. I think there's just a lot that goes into that. I'm not trying to limit the digital signs by any means, but there's some pretty simple regulations that I think we could pick up that would be easy to stick in here.
yeah. Some safety things. Awesome.
So in the 158.10, and I'm gonna reference 11 too. So my only issue with 158.10, it's talking about numbers on the building needing to be a certain visibility, certain size, all that, which I totally understand from a safety perspective. But down in section 11, again, I'm gonna note that penalty is $100 a day, which is a lot for somebody not having their street address properly displayed. And so just a couple of other things, like section B1 is talking about it being a minor misdemeanor. That's not, I wouldn't normally use the word misdemeanor for an ordinance violation, so you might want to change that language a little bit. But down on the next page, it's talking about kind of that maximum fine would not exceed $1,200. So the only thing that would concern me about that is for a municipal court not of record, which I believe this would be. If you go over $500 for your maximum fine, you're entitled to a right by a jury trial. So you may be signing the city up for some trials that the city attorney may not appreciate.
Yeah, and 1,200 is current, what our maximum fine is.
Okay.
But again, this is why we're having this conversation, because things need to change. So you're saying it might be better to maybe think about that 500 limit so that we.
Personally, I don't care. I mean, your city attorney and your city council are the ones that are looking at potential jury trials if they hit that 1,200.
Okay.
So, and I mean, I'm not going to claim to be an expert on that amount, so it could be different, but I think it's 5. So.
Okay. Awesome. think,
when and if this is adopted, what will happen to current signs that are in good repair and that don't meet this? Do they become non-conforming, or do they get grandfathered, or do they have to come in compliance? I mean, I didn't see that that addressed in here anywhere, and I don't know if that's something that gets addressed later, or if the city council addresses that. How does that?
yeah, I need language to add
Yeah.
in. I think generally we have this language of when something's previous to a code change, it's like you said, grandfathered
Yeah,
in,
until
but
unless they made a
specific sign
change or
language.
something, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I think there's probably some
Yeah.
city signs out there that don't meet
I
this
agree, maybe we need
requirement.
to add some language though.
Yeah.
That was my question. I assumed that the existing signs would be grandfathered in, but what if business changes out and they put new signage up? It may be in the same space that the
Mhm.
old sign is, or they're gonna have to, can they do that, or do they have to conform to existing
That's a great question.
code?
And good something we gotta think about. So,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, I feel like the sign's not conforming. I don't have any issue grandfathering in the original purchaser owner, but I would have an issue with us letting the new people come in and continue to use that. We don't if we have somebody who's coming in and redoing something or redoing something house related or something else, they've got to meet the new code standards, so.
Mhm. Yeah.
It seems to me it seems like the same thing, you'd have to meet the new standard.
and that was, we did have one, obviously we've seen a lot of sign issues, and so with my code team, I saw one specific example where this group had a non-conforming sign actually in our right-of-way, but we couldn't really do anything about it because of its non-conforming, so. And then the thought would be as soon as ownership changes, then it could be taken down or removed, or. And if we're in line with that, I can get some language for that.
Is there any other comments or discussion on that? Do we want to table this item for next month and review the edits again?
Yes.
I'll move to table this till next month,
Thanks
Second.
again for y'all's.
regular meeting.
Yeah.
I'll
Thank-
second that.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Call for a vote, please.
Drew,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
Whitney,
Yes.
Clint,
Yes.
Dr. Newsom.
4B, consider the approval of lot code edits.
Yeah, so this one's just a couple edits to language, in specifically section 155 and then the district regulations chart. Both are attached. The edits made in 155.065 are just in letter A. I'll just read it and then maybe I'll provide some context of conversations we've had. Residential lots shall be not less than the required width at the front building line and shall abut a street a distance of not less than 35 feet when situated around a cul-de-sac or abutting a curve with a radius of less than 50 feet. In all other scenarios, lots shall abut a street with frontage as described in the district regulations. Beforehand, it just said basically that the required width at the front building line shall abut a street a distance of not less than 35 feet, and that was it. So there was some confusion if you didn't go to the hyperlinked district regulations that your minimum lot abutting a street would be 35 feet. And so as I've gotten to know the code more, I see that there's clarity in the district regulations, but there's confusion in this situation. If you look at the graphic right near this section, it kind of illustrates that particularly and specifically around that cul-de-sac, it should be that 35 feet or the radius of 50. So that's just an edit there. The reason that's a 50-foot radius is that's just engineer recommendation. That at that point, that radius is where a turn starts happening, and developers are not incentivized to create turns to create more lots because turns are expensive. So you wouldn't have that issue. But 50 feet seems like a fair, 50-foot radius seems like a fair, hey, this is rounded enough to be a lot reduction size. And in the building lot line would be the same once you go back from that 35 feet. So that's the edit there. And then just with the district regulations, I'm not sure if y'all were aware, but district regulations, our current district regulations chart is not up to date online. We're having some issues with American Legal Publishing. They haven't been very quick. And so honestly, I'd been operating off the wrong chart. And this is the most updated chart as of July 2023. And the only change here is lot width. If you look at the attachment A, lot width at lot line, that's the only change. It was front building or at building line, but now it's lot line. Another thing, that's the only change that I've proposed, other than to remove the hyperlink so that's visible for citizens. The only other thing I'll make a note of is that I wasn't aware of actually, is an F. This was approved in July, but this changes our lot sizes quite a bit, where it says townhomes as described in the International Residential Code adopted by the city should be classified R3 and require no side setback limitations when abutting other townhome R3 property. When adjacent to other property, there should be a 5-foot side setback. For interior lot minimums with width shall be 28 feet, and lots must also meet setback requirements of an extra 5 feet or 15 feet depending on the configuration and adjacent roadways. Minimum total lot area shall be 3,200 square feet. So that's a very small lot, which just anyway, that was brought to my notice as a new add-in to the code earlier. Sorry about that.
So Reed, I actually have a question about that. So back at the top, under letter B, 155.065, letter B, the area of residential lots shall not be less than 6,000 square feet. So I may just need help understanding how those things relate.
Yeah. So this before that 3,200 was changed, that was the minimum, and that was for, I believe, R3 or R2.
I'm saying that language still exists in this code, though, right?
One more time.
The minimum of 6,000 still exists in this code, correct?
Yeah, in this code, but then in the district regulations, we have and maybe I would need to change that then to 3,200 if that townhome is still. So I can change that.
And do we have townhome clearly defined?
As in F, and then in there's I want to say it's R3, there's a section I think about townhome, but I'd have to confirm. And I guess it says as described in the IRC, International Residential Code.
I have a concern about the 3,200 square feet, and maybe this is something that Drew's knocking on, but we don't have a zoning district that's classified as townhomes.
Mm-hmm.
Townhomes can go into R3 or possibly R2. I don't know. So is it
R3? Yeah.
And townhomes are very loosely defined in the IRC. I mean, essentially, it's a string of buildings that have a common wall that goes from floor to ceiling, whether it's, and I think it says 3 or more.
Yeah.
So my fear with that is we end up with a bunch of 3,200 square foot, 28 foot wide lots that people start to create so that they can put these strips of townhomes in them.
Yeah.
But we don't have a district that defines where these things can go.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying we're not going to get there, but maybe it's a little cart before the horse.
Mm-hmm.
I like the townhome thing. I think it's great. The only part of that item F that you just read that is worrisome to me is the 28 foot width and the 3,200 square feet.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see a lot of replat applications all of a sudden if we approve that.
Yeah. And to clarify, that was approved. I was just bringing that up from the past.
I would recommend that
This was approved already?
This townhome section I found in the latest July 2023. I'd never seen it. I found it in our minutes, our agendas. It
I
was
don't believe these notes were a part of that.
yeah, that's where I found it, but I wasn't there, so I don't know.
But it's not been published, it's just something that has already gone through city council?
And was never put on our website.
I remember making the edits. I don't remember the townhome being a part of it, and it's not included in the table above.
Okay,
So we did make changes to the table above. We did not discuss nor approve the notes.
okay,
So if that's included in there, from my recollection, I think that was an error.
okay. Well then, what I can do is, obviously, I need to make an edit, and can remove that, and as we, for
I would
next
like
one.
to strike that portion of F.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just my 2 cents.
yeah. And I think you're right, Shane. I think it could be a good idea with neighborhood districts and planning, but
Yeah, I think as we develop this, revised code, that we'll end up with some things like this that are warranted for townhomes or townhome size properties within, but right now it would just be a rampant run on R3 to chop them up into 28-foot wide properties, in my opinion.
yeah. Okay. Well, then I can table this and then bring it back with that one change of, as long as there's no other changes, I can make that edit for next month.
I have another, oh, sorry, Whitney.
Sorry. I had a question about that section C on the septic tank or individual sewage disposal device. Is the 22,000 square feet, is that current DEQ standards?
Yes, half an acre.
Reed, would you mind double checking that? I've heard recently that that DEQ has some exceptions for smaller lots depending on the type of sewage treatment.
Okay.
Can we just look at that
I'll
one
look
more
into
time?
that.
Thanks.
Yep.
I have a question on your reference to the July of 23 update that you found.
Yeah.
Is that where these lot coverage percentages were modified as well?
Yes, I found all of these in the minutes.
So these percentages have already been approved and done one time?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess maybe best approach is table it now. I'll get this in front of y'all, the newest one, and we can get it back on for next month.
Any other comments? I move to table 4B until the next regular meeting.
Second?
Have a motion and a second. Call for a vote, please.
Drew,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
Whitney,
Yes.
Clint,
Yes.
Dr. Newsom.
Under Administration 4C, consider the approval of proposed special meeting dates.
So these are just special meeting dates for us to get together to start talking about some of those future planning things that we've all been sharing in passing, but getting together and having those conversations, sharing more about code thoughts and possibly using these dates as needed for code writer things. And generally these dates proposed, I know we've seen them and they've been in front of us, but just right away, the April 11th, that will have to change because Pam Polk is coming in. That's her party. So, and I think it's a 6 p.m. party, and this would be a 5:30 meeting. So,
Do we want to try and just push that by a week, or?
Yeah.
I don't know if that is acceptable or not.
It's fine with me.
It's fine with me.
That's the,
It'd be the 18th, I guess. Proposing changing that April 11th to April the 18th.
Okay. And I don't know,
We could also look at the 16th to try to accommodate, so 2 weeks from today. Dr. Newsom, does that help you any? It's a Tuesday instead of a Thursday.
April 16th, yeah, that works for me.
Whitney, how about you?
I really never know if I'm coming or going, so as far as I know, I can be here.
Do you have any other city meetings planned for this room on that day, Reed?
it doesn't look like it. Yeah, no, I think next Tuesday is that, planet, or city council, and then after that, we don't have anything that 16th. Nothing.
There's nothing for the city plan.
Cool.
So are you guys in favor of changing the 11th to the 16th?
Yes.
Actually, I'm not available. Again, feel free to meet without me.
So we're back on the 18th then?
That's awesome.
Back to the 18th, okay.
Okay.
Keep it on Thursday. Anybody? Okay. Let's make the edit to the 18th. April 18th. Keep the other dates the same. We have a
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
have a motion and a second. Call for a vote, please.
Drew,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
Whitney,
Yes.
Clint,
Yes.
Dr. Newsom.
Yes.
Just to make another comment on those meetings, Read, what we had talked about before is if we have a light meeting for the regular meeting, we may try to push those agenda items over and use this as kind of overflow.
Yeah.
So let's try to make the best use of the time that we've got.
I think tonight's almost a good example of that. Where, yeah.
Is there any new business?
Sir.
We have a motion to adjourn.
So second.
Have a motion and a second. Call for a vote, please.
Drew,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
Whitney,
Yes.
Clint,
Yes.
Dr. Newsom.
We are adjourned. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.